I'm the Executive Director of Humanities Montana. I'm proud to say this is my first Montana Festival of the Book as the Executive Director, but as you probably know, it's the 10th Montana Festival of the Book. And so what I'd like to do is begin by thanking the wonderful people and organizations that make this possible. I think one of the extraordinary aspects of this event is that it is essentially free, that you come here and you get to see and hear these extraordinary talents, and that is not by accident, of course. And so let me just take a moment to thank some of the organizations that make this possible. So let me thank first the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Montana Arts Council, the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, the Missoulian, and Montana Public Radio. And we also have to thank our local booksellers, and I'm going to name them specifically, and I'm going to urge you to please buy books during the festival. Not only because we believe in that, of course, that's what we believe in, but because it's good for our local economy, of course. Barnes & Noble, Fact and Fiction Downtown and On Campus, and Shakespeare and Company. So, yeah, thank you. So we couldn't do this without them. Thank goodness they're with us and they're funders. But it's the people, of course, that we often think about. And I want to thank the staff that's been working tirelessly to put this event together. I think it's going pretty seamlessly, and that's not by accident. Let me thank these people. Judy Klein, Susan Carlson, Shannon O'Leary, Erica Blau, Lisa Teberg, Claire Leonard, and Ken Stoltz. But above all, we have to thank one person. You cannot believe the number of hours, the number of details, the number of commitments she makes in order to get this done, and that is Kim Anderson. Please join me. Thank you. So why are we here? Why are we here together? I would claim we're here because we would be nowhere without words. Words define us, they reveal us, they challenge us, they guide us. The Montana Festival of the Book celebrates words put to extraordinary uses by gifted craftsmen, artists, magicians. We journey to places far and near, familiar and strange, and we come to know ourselves as never before. Emerson famously claimed that we both love and envy writers because, he put it this way, in every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. That's gorgeous, but I think a little somber, right? A little dire. And what I would suggest is no, we are here at a festival to celebrate together the wonder, the magic, the privilege of the written word put to these extraordinary purposes. And so I thank you for being here at the 10th Annual Montana Festival of the Book. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mike Halligan, who will introduce our first reader. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. It's a bit ironic that I get the opportunity to introduce our first speaker, since I spent most of my high school career organizing keggers, and it was that activity that largely got me into the rice paddies of Vietnam, where the light bulbs finally went on, and hopefully most of you have come by your love of books naturally and didn't need that external stimulation. Some of our greatest writers are associated forever with a certain place. Here in the West, we think of writers like Wallace Stegner, Norman Maclean, Tom McGuane, authors inextricably linked with our landscape. Certainly no one writing today has a stronger sense of place than our first reader tonight. Dennis Lehane is as intertwined with Boston as the Red Sox or the Charles River. In his first 5 novels, private detectives Patrick Kenzie and Angela Gennaro introduced us to Boston block by block and character by character. Since then, Lehane's portraits have become increasingly nuanced and haunting. Mystic River, published in 2001, creates the whole universe in the South Boston neighborhood. In 2003's Shutter Island, Lehane locks us into a hospital for the criminally insane in an island off the coast of Massachusetts in the 1950s. Martin Scorsese's film version will be in theaters in just a few months. Shutter Island was followed by a story collection, Coronado, in which he explored new landscapes and tells us a small town is a hard place to keep a secret. In The Given Day, his most recent work, he returns to Boston and gives us, to quote one of his characters, a fierce, terrible, historical epic. This is Boston in 1919, a setting for racial tensions, the Volstead Act, Bolsheviks and anarchists, the Spanish influenza, and much more. The New York Times applauds the book's searing precision and calls it a huge, impassioned, intensively researched book that brings history alive by grounding the present in the lessons of the past. Finally, in just one more week, he'll bring us a new treat as the editor of a collection of stories called Boston Noir. Dennis Lehane joins us here tonight very far from his home turf because he wanted to take part in a tribute to James Crumley at an event earlier today. We're very grateful that he feels the same connection to James Crumley's works as many of us do. Please help me welcome Dennis Lehane.
Hi. Wow, thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for supporting the arts. Please keep doing it, or otherwise we'll be left with a very ugly world, in my opinion. I'm going to read just the opening to The Given Day. And I know several of you are students, writing students, or are thinking about that path. So my first rule of writing after just tell the friggin' story is don't do it unless it scares the shit out of you. I've never been able to write unless I'm in a state of really horrible and perpetual terror. I guess I could write the other way. I just don't think I'd be very good at it, or I'd be very boring to be around. So I decided after I had 5 books in a series and they were very successful, they'd gotten to the point where they were finally successful, that I was going to leave the series and I was going to write a book, a sort of Russian-influenced small scale tragedy set in a fictitious neighborhood in Boston in which everybody loses. And my publisher said, joy. And so I wrote that, and that became Mystic River, and that did okay. So then I freaked out because it did so well. And I said, well, if the critics have figured out that I'm good, then I must be bourgeois. And so I must run away from this idea. And I know what I want to do next. I want to do a 1950s B-movie influenced Gothic set on an island. And my publisher said, yay. And then I said, oh no, but wait, after that I'm going to follow it with a collection of short stories, because we all know how successful those usually are. And then I said, I think I'm going to make the greatest career move of my life, and I'm going to vanish for 5 years, and I'm going to write a book about 1919 America, which we all know is a time period that people have an insatiable thirst for. So that's what I did. So this is the opening, and I came to this opening because I heard a story that one time Babe Ruth, during the World Series between the Cubs and the Red Sox in 1918, got drunk and destroyed a bunch of hats on a train. And I just thought, that's just one of the coolest things I ever heard. I don't know why. And that leads me to my third rule of writing, such as it is. If you have an idea and you don't feel that's the coolest thing I've ever heard, then you should probably go look for another idea. That should be your base. It's your baseline. If you're not excited about it, nobody else will be. So don't worry about anybody else, if anybody else will be excited by your idea. Worry only if you're excited by it. So I was excited to tell the story of Babe Ruth breaking a bunch of hats. And that led to this, none of which, trust me, was planned, including the second major character in the book who walked into the book, unbeknownst to me. And you'll meet him, and then I'm going to end. So I'm just going to read the first couple of sections of the opening of The Given Day. Due to travel restrictions placed on Major League Baseball by the War Department, the World Series of 1918 was played in September and split into 2 homestands. The Chicago Cubs hosted the first 3 games, with the final 4 to be held in Boston. On September 7th, after the Cubs dropped Game 3, the 2 teams boarded a Michigan Central train together to embark on the 27-hour trip, and Babe Ruth got drunk and started stealing hats. They'd had to pour him onto the train in the first place. After the game, he'd gone to a house a few blocks east of Wabash, where a man could find a game of cards, a steady supply of liquor, and a woman or two. And if Stuffy McGinnis hadn't known where to look for him, he would have missed the trip home. As it was, he puked off the rear of the caboose as the train chugged out of Central Station at a little after 8 in the evening and wound its way past the stockyards. The air was woolen with smoke and the stench of butchered cattle, and Ruth was damned if he could find a star in the black sky. He took a pull from his flask and rinsed the vomit from his mouth with a gargle of rye and spit it over the iron rail and watched the spangle of Chicago's skyline rise before him as he slid away from it. As he often did when he left a place and his body was leaden with booze, he felt fat and orphaned. He drank some more rye. At 23, he was finally becoming one of the more feared hitters in the league. In a year when home runs in the American League had totaled 96, Ruth had accounted for 11, damn near 12%. Even if someone took into account the 3-week slump he'd suffered in June, pitchers had started to treat him with respect. Opposing hitters, too, because Ruth had pitched the Sox to 13 wins that season. He'd also started 59 games in left and 13 at first. Couldn't hit lefties, though. That was the knock on him. Even when every roster had been stripped to its shells by players who'd enlisted in the war, Ruth had a weakness that opposing managers had begun to exploit. Fuck him. He said it to the wind and took another hit from his flask, a gift from Harry Frazee, the team owner. Ruth had left the team in July, went to play for the Chester Shipyards team in Pennsylvania because Coach Barrow valued Ruth's pitching arm far more than his bat, and Ruth was tired of pitching. You threw a strikeout, you got applause. You hit a home run, you got mass eruption. Problem was, the Chester Shipyards preferred his pitching too. When Frazee threatened them with a lawsuit, Chester Shipyards shipped Ruth back. Frazee had met the train and escorted Ruth to the back seat of his Roush & Lang electric opera coupe. It was maroon with black trim, and Ruth was always amazed by how you could see your reflection in the steel no matter the weather or time of day. He asked Frazee what it cost, a buggy like this, and Frazee idly fondled the gray upholstery as his driver pulled onto Atlantic Avenue. "More than you, Mr. Ruth," he said, and handed Ruth the flask. The inscription, etched into the pewter, read, "Ruth, George Herman, Chester, Pennsylvania, 7/1/18 to 7/7/18. He fingered it now and took another swig, and the greasy odor of cow's blood mixed with the metallic smell of factory towns and warm train tracks. "I am Babe Ruth," he wanted to shout off the train, "and when I'm not drunk and alone at the back of a caboose, I'm someone to be reckoned with. A cog in the wheel, yes, and you bet I know it, but a diamond-crusted cog, the cog of cogs. Someday..." Ruth raised his flask and toasted Harry Frazee and all the Harry Frazees of the world with a string of lewd epithets and a bright smile. Then he took a swig and it went to his eyelids and tugged them downward. "I'm going to sleep, you old whore," Ruth whispered to the night, to the skyline, to the smell of butchered meat, to the dark Midwestern fields that lay ahead, to every ashen mill town between here and Governor's Square, to the smoky, starless sky. He stumbled into the stateroom he shared with Jones, Scott, and McGinnis, and when he woke at 6 in the morning, still fully clothed, he was in Ohio. He ate breakfast in the dining car and drank 2 pots of coffee and watched the smoke pour from the stacks in the foundries and steel mills that squatted in the Black Hills. His head ached, and he added a couple of drops from his flask to his coffee cup, and his head didn't ache anymore. He played canasta for a while with Edward Scott, and then the trade made a long stop in Summerford, another mill town, and they stretched their legs in a field just beyond the station, and that's when he first heard of a strike. It was Harry Hooper, the Sox team captain and right fielder, and second baseman Dave Sheehan, talking to Cubs left fielder Leslie Mann and catcher Bill Kellifer. McGinnis said the 4 of them had been thick as thieves the whole trip. About what? Ruth said, not really sure he cared. Don't know, Stuffy said. Muffin flies for a price, you think? Tankin'? Hooper crossed the field to them. We're going to strike, boys. Stuffy McGinnis said, you're drunk. Hooper shook his head. They're fucking us, boys. Who? The commission. Who do you think? Heidler, Herman, Johnson, them. Stuffy McGinnis sprinkled tobacco into a slip of rolling paper and gave the paper a delicate lick as he twisted the ends. How so? Stuffy lit his cigarette, and Ruth took a sip from his flask and looked across the field at a small fringe of trees under the blue sky. They changed the gate distribution of the series, Hooper said, the percentage of receipts. They did it last winter, but they didn't tell us till now. Wait, McGinnis said, we get 60% of the first 4 gates. Harry Hooper shook his head, and Ruth could feel his attention beginning to wander. He noticed telegraph lines stretched at the edge of the field, and he wondered if you could hear them hum if you got close enough. Gate receipts, distribution. Ruth wanted another plate of eggs, some more bacon. Harry said, we used to get 60%, now we get 55%. Attendance is down, the war, you know, and it's our patriotic duty to take 5% less. McGinnis shrugged, then we forfeit 40% of that to Cleveland, Washington, and Chicago, Harry said. For what? Stuffy said, kicking their asses to 2nd, 3rd, and 4th? Then, listen boys, then another 10% to war charities. Are you seeing this now? Stuffy scowled. He looked ready to kick someone small he could really get his leg into. Babe threw his hat in the air and caught it behind his back. He picked up a rock and threw it at the sky. He threw his hat again. It'll all work out, he said. Hooper looked at him. What? Whatever it is, Babe said, we'll make it back. Stuffy said, how, Jidge? You tell me that? How? Somehow. Babe's head was beginning to hurt again. Talk of money made his head hurt. The world made his head hurt. Bolsheviks overthrowing the Tsar, the Kaiser running roughshod over Europe, anarchists tossing bombs in the streets of this very country, blowing up parades and mailboxes. People were angry, people were shouting, people were dying in trenches and marching outside factories, and it all had something to do with money. The Babe understood that much, but he hated thinking about it. He liked money, he liked it just fine, and he knew he was making plenty, and he stood to make plenty more. He liked his new motor scooter, and he liked buying good cigars and staying in swell hotel rooms with heavy curtains and buying rounds for the bar. But he hated thinking about money or talking about money. He just wanted to get to Boston. He wanted to hit a ball, paint the town. Governor's Square teemed with brothels and good saloons. Winter was coming. He wanted to enjoy it while he could before the snow came, the cold, before he was stuck back in Sudbury with Helen and the smell of horses. He clapped Harry on the shoulder and repeated his estimation. Somehow it'll all be fine. You'll see. Harry Hooper looked at his shoulder. He looked off in the field. He looked back at Ruth. Ruth smiled. Go be a good babe, Harry Hooper said, and leave the talk to the men. Harry Hooper turned his back on him. He wore a straw boater, tilted back slightly from his forehead. Ruth hated boaters. His face was too round for them, too fleshy. They made him look like a child playing dress-up. He imagined taking Harry's boater off his head and flinging it onto the roof of the train. Harry walked off into the field, leading Stuffy McGinnis by the elbow, his chin tilted down. Babe picked up a rock and eyed the back of Harry Hooper's seersucker jacket, imagined a catcher's mitt there, imagined the sound of it, a sharp rock against a sharp spine. He heard another sharp sound replace the one in his head, though, a distant crack similar to the crack of a log snapping in the fireplace. He looked east to where the field ended in a small strand of trees. He could hear the trains hissing softly behind him and stray voices from the players and the rustle of the field. 2 engineers walked behind him talking about a busted flange, how it was going to take 2 hours, maybe 3 to fix, and Ruth thought, 2 hours in this shithole? And then he heard it again, a dry, distant crack, and he knew that on the other side of those trees, someone was playing baseball. He crossed the field alone and unnoticed, and he heard the sounds of the ball game grow closer, the sing-song catcalls, the rough scuff of feet chasing down a ball on the grass, the wet slap thump of a ball sent to its death in an outfielder's glove. He went through the trees and removed his coat in the heat, and when he stepped out of the grove, they were changing sides, men running in toward a patch of dirt along the first base line, while another group ran out from a patch by third, colored men. He stood where he was and nodded at the center fielder trotting out to take his spot a few yards from him, and the center fielder gave him a curt nod back and then appeared to scan the trees to see if they planned on giving birth to any more white men today. Then he turned his back to Babe and bent at the waist and placed his hand and glove on his knees. He was a big buck, as broad-shouldered as the Babe, though not as heavy in the middle or, Babe had to admit, in the ass. The pitcher didn't waste any time. He barely had a wind-up, just long goddamn arms, and he swung the right one like he was unleashing a rock from a slingshot meant to travel an ocean, and Babe could tell even from here that the ball crossed the plate on fire. The batter took a nice clean cut and still missed it by a half a foot. Hit the next one, though. Hit it solid with a crack so loud it could have only come from a busted bat, and the ball soared straight at him and then went lazy in the blue sky like a duck deciding to swim the backstroke, and the center fielder shifted one foot and opened his glove, and the ball fell as if relieved right into the heart of the leather. Ruth's vision had never been tested. He wouldn't allow it. Ever since he was a boy, he could read street signs, even those painted on the corners of buildings, from distances far greater than anyone else. He could see the texture of the feathers on a hawk 100 yards above him in hunt, streaking like a bullet. Balls looked fat to him and moved slow. When he pitched, the catcher's mitt looked like a hotel pillow. So he could tell, even from this distance, that the batter who came up next had a fucked up face. A small guy, rail thin, but definitely something on his face, red welts or scar tissue against toffee brown skin. He was all energy in the box, bouncing on his feet and his haunches, a whippet standing over the plate, trying to keep from busting out of his skin. And when he connected with the ball after 2 strikes, Ruth knew this Negro was going to fly, but even he wasn't prepared for how fast. The ball hadn't finished arcing toward the right fielder's feet, and Ruth knew he'd miss it before he did, and the whippet was already rounding first. When the ball hit the grass, the right fielder barehanded and didn't so much as stutter step before he planted and let her loose, that ball leaving his hand like he'd caught it sleeping with his daughter. And no time to blink before it hit the second baseman's glove. But the whippet, he was already standing on second, standing tall, never slid, never dove, waltzed on in there like he was picking up the morning paper, stood looking back out to center field until Ruth realized he was looking at him. So Ruth tipped his hat, and the boy flashed him a grim, cocky smile. Ruth decided to keep his eyes on this boy, knowing whatever he was going to do next, it would have the feel of something special. Everybody okay? The man on second had played for the Wrightville Mudhawks. His name was Luther Lawrence, and he'd been cut loose from the Mudhawks in June after he got into a fight with Jefferson Reese, the team manager and first baseman, big-toothed Smiley Tom, who acted like a perfume poodle around white folks and badmouthed his own people in the house where he worked just outside of Columbus. Luther heard the specifics one night from this girl he ran around with, some fine young woman named Lila, who worked in the same house with Jefferson Reese. Lila told him Reese was pouring soup from the tureen in the dining room one night, the white folks going on and on about uppity Negroes in Chicago, the way they walked the streets so bold, didn't even drop their eyes when a white woman passed. Old Reese, he piped in with, "Laws, it's a terrible shame. Yes, sir, the Chicago colored ain't no more than a chimpanzee swinging from the vine. No time for churching. Want to drink himself out of Friday, poker himself out of Saturday, and love some other man's woman straight through Sunday." He said that? Luther asked Lila in the bathtub of the Dixon Hotel, coloreds only. Got some froth going in the water, swept the suds up over Lila's small, hard breasts, loving the look of them bubbles on her flesh the color of unpolished gold. Said a lot worse, Lila told him. Don't you go confronting that man, though, now, baby. He's a cruel one. When Luther confronted him anyway in the dugout at Inkwell Field, Reese stopped smiling right quick and got this look in his eyes, a hard, ancient look that spoke of not being far enough removed from sun torture in the fields that made Luther think, uh-oh. But by then, Reese was on him, his fist like the butt end of a bat on Luther's face. Luther tried to get as good as he got, but Jefferson Reese, more than twice his age, had some fury in him gone so deep that when it finally let go, it came out all the hotter and harder for having been kept down in the darkness for so long. He beat Luther into the ground, beat him fast and mean, beat him till the blood mixed with the dirt and the chalk and the dust of the field came off him in strings. His friend Aeneas James said to Luther while he was in the charity ward of St. John's, "Shit, boy, fast as you are, why don't you just run when you see that crazy old man get that look in his eyes?" Luther had had a long summer to consider that question, and he still didn't have an answer. Fast as he was, and he'd never met a man faster, he wondered if he was just heartsick of running. But now, watching the fat man who reminded him of Babe Ruth watching him from the trees, Luther found himself thinking, "You think you seen some running, white man? You ain't. You're about to see some now, though, so tell your grandkids." And he took off from second, just as Sticky Joe Bean came out of that octopus throne motion of his, had a hair of a moment to see the white man's eyes bulge out as big as his belly, and Luther's feet moved so fast that the ground ran under him more than he ran over it. He could actually feel it moving like a river in early spring, and he pictured Tyrell Hawk standing at third, twitching because he'd laid out all night drinking. And Luther was counting on that because he wasn't just settling for third today, no sir, thinking that's right, you best believe baseball is a game of speed, and I'm the speediest son of a bitch any of y'all ever see. And when he raised his head, the first thing he saw was Tyrell's glove right beside his ear. The next thing he saw just to his left was the ball, a shooting star gone sideways and pouring smoke, and Luther shouted, "Boo!" And it came out sharp and high, and yep, Tyrell's glove jerked up 3 inches. Luther ducked, and the ball sizzled under Tyrell's glove and kissed the hairs on the back of Luther's neck, hot as the razor in Moby's barbershop on Meridian Avenue, and he hit the third base bag with tiptoes of his right foot and came barreling up the line, the ground shooting so fast under his feet he felt like he might just run out of it, go off the edge of a cliff, right off the edge of the world. He could hear the catcher, Ransom Boynton, shouting for the ball, shouting, "Here now, here now." He looked up, saw Ransom a few yards ahead, saw that ball coming in his eyes and the tightening of his kneecaps, and Luther took a gulp of air the size of an ice block and turned his calves into springs and his feet into pistol hammers. He hit Ransom so hard he barely felt him, just went right over him and saw the ball slap into the wooden fence behind home at the exact moment his foot hit the plate. The two sounds, one hard and clean, the other scuffed and dusty, wrapping around each other, and he thought, faster than any of y'all even dream of being. He came to a stop against the chest of his teammates. In their pawing and hooting, he turned around to see the look on the fat white man's face, but he wasn't at the tree line anymore. No, he was almost at second base, running across the field toward Luther, little baby's face all jiggly and smiling and his eyes spinning in their sockets like he'd just turned 5 and someone had told him he was getting a pony. And he couldn't do nothing to control his body, had to just shake and jump and run for the happiness of it. And Luther got a real look at that face and thought, no. But then Ransom Boynton stepped up beside him and said it out loud. "Y'all ain't gonna believe this, but I do believe that there is Babe Ruth running toward us like a fat fucking freight train." That's it. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Kate Gadbo. I directed the UM Creative Writing Program from 1995 to 2007. Andrew Sean Greer's class was the first one I advised as director, and his classmates were quite a talented bunch. A number of them published early and well. Allison Golden had a piece in Harper's. J. Robert Lennon's first novel, written and set here in Missoula, came out in 1997. David Gilbert, also here at the Festival of the Book this year, published Remote Feed in 1998. Rian Ellis's Afterlife came out in 2000, and Amanda Iyer Ward, also here this evening, published Sleep Toward Heaven a few years later. And I learned right before I came up here that Miley was also in a class with Andrew, taught by Bill Kittredge. So there was some talent going around. My memories of Andy as a student mostly involved laughing. He could tell very funny stories, mostly stories in which he was a colossal failure at something. As an actor, a waiter, a chauffeur in New York. Had I not read his MFA admission file, I wouldn't have dreamed, in light of those stories, that he was a star student at Brown, the speaker at his own graduation. He looked younger than many of his composition students he taught here. and his various enthusiasms were infectious. Over the years since he graduated and moved to San Francisco, Andy has returned to Missoula regularly, thanks to David's family connection here. Even as his books have made him famous, he hasn't lost the ability to laugh at himself. And he hasn't lost his boyish good looks either, come to think of it. He may be aging backward. When he finished our program, Andy already had some excellent stories in the publishing pipeline, and his collection, How It Was for Me, came out from Picador in April of 2000. A reviewer described the stories as humane and hopeful, wry and rueful, quirky and languorous in ways that are too rare. A fair description of the author himself, in my estimation. Just a year later, Andy's first novel, The Path of Minor Planets, appeared and garnered a brief review in the New Yorker, among many others. But it was his second novel, The Confessions of Max Tivoli, published by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux in 2004, that put Andy on the literary map. It was reviewed widely and earned a number of awards. Yes, the character ages backward. But no, Andy did not try to write his own version of Fitzgerald's story involving Benjamin Button and later Brad Pitt. As he said in one interview, I stole from Proust and Nabokov, but never from Fitzgerald. It was Proust, the late John Updike referenced in an astonishing long review of the Confessions of Max Tivoli, published in the New Yorker in January of 2004. Updike wrote, like Proust, Greer presents life as essentially a solitude, an ever-renewed exile from the present, a shifting set of gorgeous mirages that nothing but descriptive genius can hold fast. A comparison like that might have paralyzed forever the descriptive genius of a good many writers, but not Andy. He went on to write The Story of a Marriage, published last year to numerous good reviews and several awards. Like Max Tivoli's, the story is set in San Francisco and in the past, but is told from the perspective of an African-American woman forced to confront a difficult secret in her marriage. This guy has range. Andy is now at work on a new novel involving time travel, he told an interviewer. That might have been a smokescreen, though, because in the same interview, Andy said one of the smartest things I've recently read about the drafting process. Quote, I just don't think you should say anything to a novelist except to keep going, because they don't know what they're doing. So you can't know what they're doing. They are really just finding their way in the dark. Here, in the dark of the lovely Wilma, I give you Andrew Sean Greer. Thank you.
Oh man, that was beautiful. Dennis Lehane has left his water here to try to infect the other readers. Nice try, Dennis. It's really incredible actually to be back in Montana and back in the Wilma Theater, because I was here back when there was a Chapel of the Dove downstairs, where there was a super creepy stuffed dove. You got to watch a movie with it. Don't you miss those days? Wow, well that was really an amazing thing to hear. It's so funny to have these people who knew you when you were 23 years old and ridiculous, pretending to take you seriously, even though they secretly, they're thinking of you as that ridiculous person. I'm actually not going to read from fiction tonight. I'm going to read from nonfiction. Why not? I never read it. This is something I wrote really recently. I'm a married man, but I'm an unusual kind of married man in which I am married in the state of California, but here in Montana, I am single. Because I've got a husband in California, but it's legal in California. We hit that little window there. But it's not legal everywhere, so I'm available, is what I'm saying. But this is, I got a call from, Dave Eggers publishes a somewhat quarterly magazine called McSweeney's. And he gave me a call in the summer and he said, hey, I got an idea. I'm putting out this newspaper in November, and I know that David, my husband, is a big car nut, and you could care less. And I thought maybe I'd send you guys to a NASCAR race. You could write about it. Now, I'm afraid my husband had bent his ear a lot about this because he is really a car nut. We get 5 magazines at our house that are car magazines. One is called Auto Week, which comes weekly, as you're probably guessing. And I met David here in Montana. You might remember him as the Kinko's guy back in the early 90s. He probably copied all your stuff at the Kinko's. But on our first car trip to Seattle, I hadn't known about this car thing at all. This is all new to me. But our first car trip to Seattle, and it's a long way, it's 9 hours. And he said, well, hey, it was a couple hours into it, he said, hey, I got an idea. Why don't you try to identify the cars as they come by? And he said it the way like a card sharp would say, what? Why don't we have a little game of poker, How about high stakes? Why not? I mean, nothing's going on. I was really, really bad at it. I couldn't do that kind of thing. It got very frustrating. I told him, I was like, it's like you're a geologist and you want me to identify rocks, but you're throwing them at me at 90 miles. This was when it was reasonable and prudent was the speed limit, It was oncoming traffic. And I have to say, I read Auto Week on the toilet every morning, and I've learned a lot. I know how to identify cars now. But we did go to NASCAR. We went to Brooklyn, Michigan, to I think the 23rd NASCAR race, and we camped there overnight for a couple nights. The first day we arrived, we went to the campground and set up our tent, and our neighbors, Monica and Stretch were their names, came over immediately and said, hey guys, how you doing? Welcome. And they looked, where are you all from? San Francisco. And I think with that phrase and looking at the little tent we had, 2 guys in a tent from San Francisco, they figured the whole thing out. And we never spoke of it. But they invited us over for beers, and we became great Facebook friends with them. They were really wonderful. And this is the part of the book where they told us we hung out late at night drinking with them and their parents and their other pals. And they told us that there was this place we had to go see in the NASCAR campground called Sin City, which was a part of the campground really difficult to find, where the most licentious activities took place, sort of stripper pole, crazy Vegas-y stuff. And we said, we've got to see that. So this is there. I'm leaving things out in this little section I've never read before. We'll see how it goes. Say, America, that you drink 10 Bud Light Limes in a row, on top of 2 cherry bombs and a sip of something pink and curdled involving Malibu coconut rum, and decide to go in search of NASCAR debauchery. Perhaps to get into the spirit of things, you bum a menthol Newport and you smoke it until green sparks appear in the corners of your eyes. Say 6 of you, similar substances coursing through your veins, head out from North Woods through a gap in the chain-link fence while the security guard isn't looking. What would you see? RVs and pop-ups decorating the dark rolling landscape, packed together like chiclets, each strung with Christmas or rope lights, or more elaborately, light up Budweiser signs and disco balls. Couples, families, or groups of guys huddled around fires, each encircled for safety's sake by rings of dead beer cans. piled in careful structures some 3 or 4 cans high. No solo women campers or groups of women, but cardboard cutouts of women holding beer signs loaded with Mardi Gras beads, besides large hand-lettered signs reading, "Beads for Boobies." Some camps are set up as tiki huts, some with simple plywood bars, but most are fold-up chairs around a fire or a cooler for a beer rest. There are over 9,000 campsites, around 50,000 campers, and during racing events, Brooklyn becomes the 3rd largest city in Michigan. South of us, the racetrack is afire with floodlights, and the glow of it rises above even the trees like northern lights. From time to time above us float flame-powered red lanterns that drift higher with the air currents and then head west and disappear into the stars. Who knows who's lighting them? One canopy is decorated with braziers, and you casually ask where they got them all. "Last night, donations, everyone," says one of the men. He then takes you on a tour of each brazier and says a judge came by an hour before smelling each one and awarded the prizes. First place is a red and black brazier, and second a pink one, and third something in black. None of the bras are for small women. "Nice work, gentlemen," your husband says, and Stretch pats him on the back saying, "I like your style." And you shoot your husband a glance. "Oh, so we're going to bond over the degradation of women now." Great. Suddenly, a pretty 30-ish woman appears from between the RVs. "Have you seen 2 small blonde girls?" she asks. She wears her hair in a long braid and is dressed in cut-off jeans decorated with caution tape. She's very drunk. "Well, no," Stretch says, pondering the idea. "What are they up to?" "They goddamn ditched us, that's what. 16 and 17. You see them, Brittany and Kelly, you tell them to get the hell home." "What's your cell number?" Stretch asks. "I ain't got a cell. They live here in town. You tell them I called the cops." "Will do." And off she staggers, her long braid swinging. You comment that looking for Brittany or Caitlin in a NASCAR rally would be like looking for hay in a haystack. "Ain't that the truth?" Stretch says happily. You've basically spent the day with Stretch and Monica, from the Kenny Wayne Shepherd concert until now, far past midnight, in a campground called Juniper Meadows where you have no right to be. The concert took place after the nationwide race at the Water Tower, where anyone with a race pass could enter the grasslands, and thousands of people were gathered around drinking cans of beer, and every other man seemed to know Stretch. Ahead on a stage, and magnified by monitors, Kenny Wayne Shepherd played his country guitar and rocked his head gently so his longish blonde hair fell over his face. "Who is Kenny Wayne Shepherd?" you would ask on the way over. And Monica answered, "Oh, you'll recognize him. Blue on Black, Deja Voodoo." You wondered aloud what would happen to all the crushed beer cans underfoot, and only later saw Onstead Boy Scout Troop 637 moving through the crowd like hyenas, tan and spotted with merit badges, picking up the cans and tossing them in recycling bags, secretly jiggling them to see if they were empty. Men with beer bongs wandered around the audience offering their services by pointing a finger at your chest. You shook your head. The man beside you took one, and his buddy emptied their beers into the funnel as the man struggled to swallow the foam that overwhelms him. Beer bongs are everywhere tonight. You pass a double one strung on a pulley from a tree and watch as it's lowered, filled with beer, and then raised again so 2 strapping young men can stand up to the tubes, and as the umpire shouts and releases the catch, race to the finish. You pass another, deeper into Brooklyn Hills Campground. Stretch is following an instinct northwest, saying he needs to be drunker to find it. And this one is 20 feet high, decorated with rope lights, with a cutout lady standing beside it, a cartoon bubble reading, "Ladies, you know what we want to see." Stretch points out that this is the fucker they tried to get him to do the night before, but he doesn't do beer bongs anymore, not since last year in a race when he found out finishing his bong that they'd put whiskey in at the end. He was drunk for days. "No more," he says, "no more, but you should give it a try." David says, "No thanks, he's had plenty in his time." And then your husband turns to you. "How about you, Andy? Ever done a beer bong?" And you recognize the little smile on his face. You will never forgive him. It's not so bad, a beer bong. Just a crouching stance and upward gaze, and people around you yelling, "Don't panic, just relax, just let it go down." some hooting and hollering, and then it comes the rush of Bud Light Lime, official sponsor, I suppose, of your hangover the next morning. From the height of 20 feet, it's a hard thing to deny. Down it goes. Well, about half of it. The rest just dribbles out of your mouth. You look up in fear that you failed again, but everyone seems elated. There's no bad beer bong, you're told. Nice job, Andy, Stretch says, patting her on the back, and your husband just laughs. And so you're no longer a virgin. Hey guys, a young man implores you, come in here and draw on my drunk friend. There's always one, Monica says. And in you all go, and are given magic markers. The poor guy is in his early 20s, black hair and pale skin, sitting on a chair with his head lolling back, aware of nothing. People have drawn all over his white shirt, mostly obscene imagery, and you merely find a black spot and write, "Wash me." Stretch ignores the obvious and writes directly on the fellow's neck, "Stretch was here." Hey, the friend objects. Hey, you wrote right on him. A shrug and a laugh. But there's no real problem here. It's all the price you pay for passing out at NASCAR. And then there is the glowing sign of a racing car, and there are the women who indeed will bare their boobies for beads, and there is the great giant Jenga set, each piece half the size of a man, where people are crowded to watch the action. But there's nothing more licentious than that. Nothing more than anything you might find at Golden Gate Park. And at last, you find the secret entrance to Sin City. Here it is, everyone, and since right here where a path leads through the dark junipers, the entrance to hell. But there, where we should find lines of drunken fans staggering through the trees, an RV is parked. A dozen folks are gathered around a fire circle as if the entrance were merely another camping spot, and Stretch asks and discovers that Sin City's closed this year. Not because the Rangers found out too outrageous for NASCAR, but because the usual campers didn't come back. They couldn't afford the tickets. Recession always hits the partiers first, Stretch notes. They've got shitty jobs, and they're no good at their jobs because they're always partying, so they're always fired. Damn it, always the first to go. Sin City's gone, Monica repeats in disbelief. It's just gone. Sorry, boys, Stretch says, shaking his head. Guess you'll have to settle for San Francisco fun now. A wide smile. Do they know we're a couple? Well, of course they do. They knew the instant we stepped out of the car. Down the street, we find a little party going on in a brightly lit Easy Up where some young girls are playing a stripped version of Red and Black and tell people the news. They nod their heads. We called that place Purgatory, one comments. He's wearing a rubber mullet. Another says her friends called it Sodom and Gomorrah. Whatever they called it, the economy ate it alive. A reverent hush passes over the crowd. Drunk from your beer bong, you ask if Bud Light Lime is a gay beer. No, the answers arrive in a rush. No, 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 of course not. The answers all come from girls. And then you notice the youngsters playing cards. The two teenage boys with them have already lost their shirts, but the girls have everything on, clearly in control of this game. Both are blonde. One is very short. But the ringleader is pretty and confident. She yells to her friend, "Hey, Brittany, tell him to take off his shoes." You nudge Stretch and you whisper, "Listen to these girls." A moment later, he turns to the ringleader and asks, "Hey, Courtney, you want another beer?" "No, thanks." It's them. It's Brittany and Courtney. You may not have found Sin City, but you have found the wayward girls. Within minutes, the RV owner is shouting, "Party's over, girls," and shutting off the lights. Stretch has let them know this is a 16 and 17-year-old who have taken control of their party, drinking their beers, and Monica has pulled the girls aside and told them their mother wants them home immediately and is calling the cops. Courtney's young face is shaking with fury. Her bleached blonde hair is frizzed from the humidity, her lipstick smeared from kissing, and she turns to Brittany, her shorter sister or cousin or friend. It has never been clear, and she hisses, "That crazy fucking bitch." And then, brave and drunk little girl that she is, she turns to the entire crowd and she says, "This is my town. Get the hell out of here." Stretch suggests that perhaps the evening is over. You all need to rest up well for the Sprint Cup tomorrow, after all. And what shocks you most, as you and your husband will speak about later in whispers in your 4-pound tent, is how kind they have all been to you, Stretch and Monica and the others. There was not a moment of wariness or suspicion. That was all on your side. These people walked over the instant you arrived and led you around every moment of the day, from concerts to dinner to drinks, wanting nothing other than to show you hospitality the NASCAR way, with the wish that you will return to the same campground beside them. Stretch and Monica telling now about the strippers he hired once who poured red wax over each other until it hardened into molds like armor breastplates. Somehow the image sticks with you. Laughing, walking away from Brittany and Courtney, who can still be heard screaming at us all, "Get the hell out of my town!" And then tomorrow at last is the Sprint Cup. Thanks, guys.
Good evening, I'm William Marcus. I serve on the board of Humanities Montana, and it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's final reader, Miley Malloy. Miley was born in Helena into a family that considered art something that was just part of life. There was pottery, photography, writing, music. Her brother Colin was a member of the Missoula band Tarkio and now leads the Decemberists. Their father worried about his children pursuing art as a career. What financial security could come from that? He worries no more. Miley left Helena for California. "I felt like I had to go somewhere," she said in an interview for The Right Question, the Montana Public Radio literary program. "I had a friend who was moving to LA. I moved with my clothes and 10 books and a table lamp and no job. I was braver then," she said. That bravery comes from her Montana roots. She wrote, "I think it's a trait of people who live in less populated places like Montana, where their great-grandparents were likely to be homesteaders, to go ahead and do things they haven't done before. Plumb a toilet, fix a roof, rewire a light, because who else is going to do it? And how hard can it be?" Miley says she approached writing the same way, blindly assuming that she'd be able to figure it out. How hard could it be? Eventually, Miley entered UC Irvine's Graduate Writers Workshop under Jeffrey Wolf. After 3 years there, she started submitting short stories to magazines. The first 2 were bought by The New Yorker and the Paris Review. And as they were getting published, she sold her first collection, Half in Love, which Scribner's published in 2002. The New York Times Book Review said that Half in Love offers up both plain speaking and mystery, subtlety and shock. Writing for Amazon.com about books she loves, she said, "I realized in a conscious, practical way that the things that give pleasure in life, like swimming pools and parties and sex, can give pleasure in language, and the ways we find answers to the serious questions in our lives can be played out more clearly in books and are easier to see." In 2 novels and 2 collections of short stories, Miley Malloy has done exactly that. Reading from her new collection of short stories called Both Ways is the Only Way I Want It. Please welcome Miley Malloy.
That was so nice. Made me shy. I'm so happy to be here. I love being back in Missoula. I love being back in Montana in general. I spent a lot of time here as a kid, and it feels like no time has passed. But I wish I didn't have to go after Dennis and Andy. We're so good. That was great. I was a complete interloper when I took Bill Kittredge's class in the writing program. I would come over in the middle of the week from Helena and then drive back. And so I didn't really know anyone. And I was only there for, half a semester. And I remember exact lines from Andy's work. He was so good already. So this is from a collection that I just published this summer called Both Ways is the Only Way I Want It, which comes from an Ammons poem that shows up in one of the stories and is the epigraph. Can you all hear me? Great. The stories were written sort of over time. Some had already been published, and some I wrote while I was writing the novels, and then some I sort of went back to and recovered when I realized I might be writing a story collection. And then I sort of got back in the pace of it, or got used to the pace again and started working on new ones. And this is one that I struggled with for a really long time and didn't think was going to work at all. It's called Lovely Rita, and I'm going to read just the first half. In 1975, Stephen Kelly was 23 and newly orphaned. His father had died of pancreatic cancer 2 years earlier, and Stephen had quit a construction job to move home and take care of his mother. She had relied on her husband so absolutely all her adult life that she had never filled a gas tank on her own or looked at a tax form. In her grief after his death, she shifted her dependence to Stephen. She told him it was lucky she'd had a son, as if no daughter of hers would be able to master a gas pump either. When she died of the same cancer as his father, one of the doctors described it as mercifully quick, but there was nothing merciful about it. Stephen felt like a boxer losing a fight, not knocked out, but dizzy from the blows. They left him the house he'd grown up in, but no money, once the taxes were paid. Their small Connecticut town, where he had spent a happy, bike-riding, bait-fishing childhood, was being transformed by the building of a nuclear power plant. When finished, the plant would pull in water to cool the reactors, which would raise the temperature of the river and kill all the fish he had grown up fishing. There were angry, impotent protests, and there were jobs for anyone who could swing a hammer. Stephen hated the plant. Everyone did. But he couldn't sell his childhood house, so he took one of the jobs. There's ice in it. The plant was 2 miles long and 1 mile wide and still being laid with pipes. Stephen was hired to build scaffolding for the pipe fitters, then take it down and build it somewhere else. It was a union job, and they'd been told to make it last, so they worked in threes. While one worked below, the other two would climb to the top of the scaffolding and sleep. Someone usually duct taped a transistor radio to the mouthpiece of one of the paging telephones so music blasted through the plant. When the security guards got close to finding the radio, it would be rescued, and the music would stop until the guards went back to their usual stations. Then the radio would move to another phone, and the music would start again, born to run, blaring over the clanging and drilling and sawing and hammering. Stephen's best friend from high school, A.C. Rawlings, worked at the plant too. A.C. had joined the Coast Guard for a while but lost interest and was home living with his mother. Any social status Stephen had in school came from A.C.'s reflected cool, and now A.C. had mythologized their teenage years, believing them to be as perfect as high school years could be. They had missed the Vietnam draft by the skin of their teeth, and A.C. considered luck to be something they had rights to and could count on. Most nights after work, they went to the bar to drink beer until the hammering in their heads subsided enough for sleep. So in some ways, nothing had changed since Stephen was 16. He was still drinking beer with A.C., except now it was legal and less exciting. It was on one of those nights that a girl showed up, hanging around. She was too skinny, with small tits and narrow hips, and she leaned on the bar next to Stephen in jeans and a tank top and ordered a gin and tonic. He thought that it was difficult not to talk to a girl standing next to you in a tank top, no matter how tired you were. "Are you old enough to drink that?" he asked her. She showed him her license. It said she was 23, 5'6", 110 pounds. He could have lifted her right into his lap. Eyes green, hair brown, Her eyes were oversized and ringed with green eyeliner and black mascara. He showed the license to AC at the next bar stool because he could already feel that AC's interest trumped his. He was going to have to get out of the way. Then he noticed the name on the card, Rita Hillier. "I know you," Stephen said. "You do?" she said. "We went to grade school together. You moved away." She narrowed her made-up eyes at him. "Did you have a lot of cavities?" "No, I mean, not more than normal." "Did I ever kiss you?" "No." She shook her head. "Then I don't remember." He could have told her that her father was the first person he had ever seen falling down drunk, but that seemed unfriendly. "You sat in front of me in Mrs. Wilson's class," he said. "You showed me how to cheat on spelling tests by keeping the practice list inside your desk and pretending to look for an eraser." "I did not." "You think I don't know who corrupted me?" "I remember cheating on math later," she said, "not spelling." "Your dad used to walk you home from school." Her eyes lost their gleam and she looked at her drink. "That was me," she said. "They took his driver's license away." "Is he all right?" "I think so." "Do you see him much?" She frowned sideways at him. "You ask a lot of questions." AC kicked him under the bar. "This is my friend AC," Stephen said. "We went to high school together, but not grade school. He doesn't ask so many questions." AC smiled his handsome smile at her, leaning forward over his beer. Stephen withdrew to the men's room to let AC move in. Behind the closed door, he stood looking at the filthy urinal, feeling disoriented by his brief return to third grade. Mrs. Wilson had caught him cheating on the spelling test, but he hadn't turned Rita in. It was his first and maybe only major act of chivalry. He got a 0 on the test and a C in spelling, but his parents had never asked about the sudden drop in his grade. He guessed that Mrs. Wilson had told them about the cheating and they were too embarrassed to mention it. Rita's dad wouldn't have cared if she cheated. The old drunk might have even applauded it as wily, but it had seemed important to protect her from the disgrace. When he went back out to the bar, Rita had her head bent close to AC's, the deal sealed, and Stephen put his arms around their shoulders. "Let's go out for a midnight nuclear protest," Stephen said, and AC whooped with eagerness. They drove down to the marina, stole a sunfish from a slip, and sailed it across the river. AC manned the tiller, and Rita stood precariously in the bow and danced in the wind. When they got to the new plant, they yelled until the lights came on and the security guards came running down to the water to see what was going on. It was a pointless thing, hassling the security guards, who were just local guys like them, getting a paycheck. But it felt good to yell on a warm night. Rita was surprisingly loud. When the guards threatened them, fat and breathless in their tight uniforms, there wasn't any wind left to sail the sunfish, so they laughed and paddled back for the marina with their hands. They could see a few stars through the haze. When they got back to the slip, Stephen was starting to sober up. AC left them to go pee off the end of the dock, and Rita said, "I'm sorry I got mad when you asked if I see my dad." "That's okay," Stephen said. "I don't see him at all," she said. "I don't know where he is." "I'm sorry. Do you remember him?" "A little." "What do you remember?" "Not that much, really," he said. "I just remember him picking you up at school. He seemed like a nice man." She looked at him skeptically, and he pretended he was telling the truth. Then AC came back, buttoning his jeans. He bear-hugged Rita, kissed her hair, and took her home. After that, AC was in love, and he couldn't shut up about it. He talked about Rita all the time, how amazing she was, how unlike other girls. He did it at the plant, where people weren't used to such happiness, and he made himself unwelcome. The married men only smiled and made jaded little jokes, but the lonely ones found it intolerable. A raffle was held for a car someone needed to unload, with 2 packs of playing cards cut in half on the bandsaw. And AC made a big show of buying a lot of tickets and asking specifically for the heart card so he could give the car and the winning card to Rita. There was open glee in the plant when he didn't win. Even though Stephen knew AC was driving everyone nuts and guessed there would be some attempt to take the Romeo down a notch, it still took him a minute to realize what was happening when a high, spooky voice came over the PA system one afternoon, filling the whole plant, calling, "Rita, lovely Rita." Then it made a kissing noise and hung up. The guys around them were already laughing, and Stephen saw knowledge dawning on AC's face. He thought he should have taken AC aside long before and told him to keep his mouth shut. The high voice came again, asking, "Rita, where are you?" Then the kissing noise. AC stalked to the nearest paging phone, holding a wrench like a weapon, the guys still laughing behind him. No one was at the phone, of course. When AC turned back with the wrench, he nearly bumped into a white hat, a liaison for the client. Normally, someone saw the white hats coming soon enough to get all the sleepers down off the scaffolding, but this one had appeared out of nowhere. "Who's doing that voice?" the inspector asked AC. "I don't know," he said. "Who's Rita?" the white hat asked. AC didn't say anything. The guys didn't either. "Tell me," the white hat said. "It'll stop," AC said. "It better," the man said. It did stop until the next inspection. As soon as the white hat got there, the voice came out over their loudspeaker again. "Rita, darling Rita," and then the kissing noise. But by then it wasn't really about AC or Rita. It had turned into a way of baiting the inspector, who went to their foreman, Frank Mantini, to complain. Someone standing outside the office heard Mantini tell the inspector it was a harmless prank, the guy's letting off steam. The white hat put a $100 bill on the foreman's desk, according to the eavesdropper, and said, "It's yours if you find out who's doing this." "I don't want the money," Frank said. "Find out anyway," the white hat said. Frank Mantini had a family at home, 3 daughters, and must have felt that his job was at stake. But he couldn't stop the prank. If he caught one guy, which he couldn't, there would always be another to carry on. They switched tactics and started to torment him specifically. The high, spooky voice would say, "Frankie, you can't catch me," and then make the kissing noise and hang up. It went on for days, 3rd grade stuff, the occasional lovely Rita, sometimes a line of the Beatles song, badly sung, but mostly taunts for Frank. The white hat came in every day. Frank Mantini started to look ill, and people were saying that whoever was doing the phone stuff should lay off. At the end of the week, Frank Mantini took AC to the bar for lunch to pump him for information. Some of the guys at the plant went to the bar every day, and the bartender had their drinks lined up. They were career drinkers, old hands, and they drove back to the plant unimpaired. Frank Mantini and AC weren't those guys. AC came back drunk and decided to take a nap, not up on the scaffolding, but in a quiet corner on the floor. Frank had already gone into his office and shut the door. AC's quiet corner, where he had put his jacket under his head, was behind a parked front loader, and someone went to use it. The poor guy climbed in, started the engine, and backed up, feeling a bump. He stopped and climbed down again to check what it was, and saw that he'd backed over AC with one of the front loader's heavy back tires, crushing his skull. Someone tripped the alarm, and the ambulance came pointlessly, and the white hat showed up. Frank Mantini got dragged out of his office, smelling of whiskey, and fell to his knees at the sight of AC dead on the floor. The death, the real weight of it, didn't hit Stephen for a long time. He felt as if he was watching everything from behind glass. He got his old rod out and went fishing, and wondered why he and AC had stopped going, why they stole boats to protest the plant, but didn't take advantage of the last years of cold water and healthy fish. He didn't catch anything, and thought maybe the fish knew what was coming, and had already cleared out. The funeral was at St. Mary's, where his parents' funerals had been, and Stephen sat in a pew like someone's accountant, thinking about what the flowers cost, and the casket. Frank Mantini, who had lost his job, was there without his family. AC's little brother, the snotty kid they used to put in a headlock, now a stocky 19-year-old with a crew cut, read from notes, his voice shaking, about how he would never have a big brother again. AC's mother, who used to cook Stephen eggs and muss his hair, tried to speak but couldn't. Then a big motherly girl with caramel-colored skin, AC's first cousin, got up and helped everyone out by saying nice things without breaking down. Rita sat next to Stephen, not crying. She had sobbed and screamed when he first told her. After the funeral, Stephen drove her home and they sat in his truck talking about nothing until finally she got out and went inside. He went back to his parents' house feeling like death was on him, a film on his face and grit in his teeth. He took a shower in his old bathroom, wishing he had a warm-hearted girl like AC's cousin to hold on to, and cried under the stream of water. In the morning, he got up to go back to the clanging plant. Rita called him 3 days later and said, "I want you to help me hold a raffle." "A raffle for what?" "For me," she said. "I want to charge $5 a ticket." "What's the prize?" he asked. "Me," she said. "I said that for a night." He thought about it, her skinny body, the odd waifishness. "No one's ever charged $5 a ticket," he said. "Well, no one's ever gotten a $5 hooker either," she said. "Some of them might have," he said. "Some of them get it for free." "I've seen the way they look at me," she said. "I think I can get $5 a ticket. That's $540 with 2 decks. If I could get 10, it would be over 1,000 and I could get out of here. But I don't know if I could get 10. It's illegal." "So is everything that goes on at that plant," she said. "Jesus, will you help me or not?" He imagined himself pushing raffle tickets for AC's girlfriend, for the girl who'd shown him how to cheat at spelling in 3rd grade. "No. You have to. I don't have to do anything. No one's going to buy a ticket. They will too. Just get me the cards. I'll sell them myself." "Get your own damn cards. You can cut them with scissors." "It's not the same," she said. "It has to look like what they're used to. I need you to help me." Stephen hung up the phone and sat looking around his mother's living room at the curtains she had sewn, now long faded, and the flowered couch where she had sat, missing his father and dying. It seemed strange now, their long marriage, their total dependence on each other. His father couldn't cook a meal or shop for groceries any more than his mother could gas up a car. In the morning, on his way to work, Stephen bought 2 decks of cards, one blue and one red. All he was going to do was give Rita the cut cards and let her do what she wanted. But Kyle Jaker, a kid on Stephen's crew, saw him at the bandsaw and asked what the raffle was for. "Nothing." "Come on," Jaker said. "AC's girlfriend wants them." "For what?" Stephen paused too long before saying, "I don't know." "Oh man, is it for her?" Stephen wondered how Jaker had guessed that and moved away. "I said I'd get her the cards, that's all." Jaker was scrappy and vain and pale-skinned, with a wild cowlick in the back of his carefully combed hair. It gave him a roosterish look. He skipped along beside. "How much?" he asked. "She wants 10. Stephen thought Jaker would balk at the price and they'd be done. But Jaker pulled a $20 bill out of his wallet. "I'll take 2, he said. Stephen had never seen a 20 come out so easily at the plant or in the bar. Maybe not in his life ever. "I'm not selling them. You just sold 2. He held the bill out, and Stephen finally took it and dealt him 2 halves from the blue deck. "The jokers," Jaker said, grinning. "Jaker's jokers, that's good luck." Word couldn't have spread faster if Stephen had announced the raffle on the paging phones, which had gone eerily silent since AC's death. And by lunchtime, he had sold all of the blue deck and started on the red. He had agreed to meet Rita at the bar, and she climbed into his truck. He put the wad of bills and the blue stubs on the seat between them, and she grabbed the cash. "I knew it," she said. "I hate this. I knew they'd buy them. You could get hurt." "I can take care of myself," she said. She lifted her hips to tuck the cash away in her tight jeans where it bulged. Then she put the blue stubs in her jacket and zipped up the pocket like a kid putting away her milk ticket. "There are other ways to get money," he said. "I've tried them. Have you seen those guys?" "You know I have. Why not just her normal tricks?" She gave him a level stare and held out her hand for the tickets. "I'll sell them," he said. "You shouldn't have to do it." Half the remaining tickets sold to the lunch crowd in the bar, and the other half sold by the end of his shift. Some guys pretended to be helping out AC's girlfriend, but most of them had a hungry glint in their eyes. She was a celebrity, lovely Rita, muse of the pager phone, the dead guy's girl. Stephen thought he was getting an ulcer. She was waiting outside the plant when he finished his shift, and he walked toward his truck, and she followed. Inside the truck, he gave her the money. "What do we do now?" she asked. "There's no we here. What do I do to run the raffle?" You put the cards in a hard hat and draw one out, and the holder of the other half wins. "Where does it happen?" "In the plant." "Can we do it at the bar?" "What is this we?" "Can I do it at the bar?" "You can't do it alone." She blew her bangs off her forehead, exasperated. "Make up your mind," she said. "I'll do it at work tomorrow," he said. He pictured himself standing in front of the hungry crowd, and he was glad he hadn't bought any tickets. If he won, having set up the raffle, they'd tear him apart. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you."